On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas housed by Houston. Why this time it might not be okay.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on social media at DJohnsonRadio, on Twitter. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's episode, unfortunately, we have to talk about Kansas getting dominated, destroyed, crushed, housed, whatever word you want to use, at number one Houston by 30 points in the regular season finale. Back-to-back years that Kansas has lost by like 20-plus points in their regular season finale now. And when you look at like Bill Self's biggest losses, biggest deficits of losses, it feels like whether it's the home losses or total losses, like majority of them have come over the last like 5 years, but then you have the title wedged in and another year where you very easily could have won a title in 2020. Just kind of a weird display of where things are at in, I guess, college basketball or something. First, today's episode, though, is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So the final score, Houston victorious 76-46. We'll recap the game, get into our goats of the game, good and bad, mostly bad as you'd imagine. Then we'll finish up with what's the latest with KU women's basketball for their Big 12 women's tournament, and looking forward for hopefully a NCAA tournament after that. So the Cougars certainly showed in this game why they can win a national title and why they're one of the best teams in the country. And on top of that, not only are they a very good team and have a difficult place to play, and it was senior night, but they could do no wrong. You know, I mean, they could have played a C game in this one and still won by like 10, 15 points, but they also played their A game, and they were hitting a bunch of threes. They were hitting a bunch of shots. You get the banked in three, you get a couple deep threes, even contested that KU played pretty good defense on, and they were just still making them through. But even through some of those shots, this was also about Kansas could do no right. And you give credit to Houston, who's an unbelievable defense and forces you into a ton of that. And so you had a combination of one of the best teams in the country versus a Kansas team, which is not up to snuff with other Kansas teams in the Bill Self era. Combine those two. So you're playing the better team on the road to begin with. Then their senior day, they're amped up. Then they play their A game. Then you play a D game, an F game. I don't know. Kansas never led in the game. They shot 33% from the floor. They were 3 of 21 from three. They only attempted 5 layups in the game. You got like 0 hustle balls, like 0 50-50 balls. You had 18 turnovers while forcing just 10. You were outscored by 20 in points off turnovers. You were minus 16 in second chance points, minus 3 in fast break points, minus 10 points in the paint. You're out assisted 17-9. That's normally a strength for you. On and on and on and on and on. I could keep listing off numbers. It was an absolute butt whooping. Here's some ranks real quick for some of the bad stats for KU, because I think this is more indicative to show you why it was one of KU's worst games. And they also happen to be playing maybe the best team that they'll play all year long. I don't know. You could argue them, UConn, whatever, and all that stuff. That was KU's least efficient game of the season. It was their second lowest effective field goal percentage of the season, their third worst turnover rate of the season. It was the least amount of made twos, their worst 3-point percentage, their fourth worst defensive efficiency game, their third worst defensive rebounding game, and a bottom 10 2 and 3-point defense games. Wrap that all together in one. You played a bad game. They played a great game. They're a better team than you. All that into a formula. Boom, you get smacked on the road. That game felt like it was over when it was 11-4. Even that early on, when it was 11-4, I kind of felt like, okay, this could get ugly. Like I started having thoughts in my mind of, oh, the Texas Tech game. And then they hit the 3 and they made it 14-4. And, you know, maybe at that point you would have thought it was over. Honestly, when it was 9-4, there was, based on some of the body language, I hate like the body language expert, body language, whatever. But like, I don't know. That seemed pretty apparent. The body language, the lack of competitiveness. I mean, that was something that like Parker Brown talked about, playing for the front of the jersey. We're in the last game of the regular season. He talked about that after the game. That's not a great sign for KU. Bill Self talked about not having a competitive level. This is not just coming from me, but it looked like the lack of, you know, competitiveness, going for those 50-50 balls. That was apparent early in the game, and you have to match that with Houston if you want to compete with them. And then it only got worse when Hunter Dickinson got hurt. And Kevin McCullar was clearly not fully right. He ended up having to rest for the entire second half. basically rested in the first half. He had no stats essentially in the first half. And I am part of this. I'm not just trying to like lump when I say, oh, everybody together, but no, this isn't part of me too. And not everybody's been on the same wave that I have been for this. Have talked about though, and there's going to be some people who still stay on this wave, that they've struggled, and that even despite that, and I've said this countless times, that I've thought this would be a better NCAA tournament team than a regular season team. Now, obviously, the Hunter Dickinson injury can have an effect on that, but that they can still, even after arguably the worst regular season of Bill Self's career, at least the worst regular season conference play of Bill Self's career, conference record proves that out by 2 games, that they can still salvage stuff in March, and that they are better set up in certain ways for the tournament. And still to that point, like that 2014 UConn team that won the title, they lost by like 40 points in their conference tournament championship, I think, to Louisville. But I don't know, man. It's less about the loss. Houston's an elite team. It's less about the blowout. Again, they're an elite team who also got bonkers hot while you were chillingly cold on even some good looks. You missed a decent amount of open corner threes. You missed some bunnies and layups that you would normally make, though we've talked about this before. Kansas does a lot of those things a lot of nights, so it's not just kind of a one night in, one night out thing. It's a bit about the trend of losing 3 of your last 4. It's a bit about the trend of your last 4 losses being by a combined like 80 points. It's a bit about them not winning more than 2 straight games. They have not won more than 2 straight games in the calendar year of 2024. Shout out to Scott Chasen for noticing and uncovering that stat. But what it's mostly about, of why I am ready to turn on the idea that, okay, this hasn't been a great regular season, but I still think they can make it wouldn't shock me if they lost in the first, second round. It wouldn't shock me if they made the Elite Eight. I've been saying that up until now. And the irony of losing on the road on senior day to the number 1 team is that it shouldn't change that. But it's mostly about, to me, in why my confidence is now finally waning after making it through the whole regular season, basically. It's the mentality. It's the mentality of how it looked, of what happened in the loss. It's just, I don't know, the lack of effort on the 50-50 balls, the lack of bringing the competitive level to the opposition when you're playing the number 1 team. How would you best describe this team? Would you describe them with the word athletic? I wouldn't. They're not an overly athletic team. Bill Self has said so himself. Are they a fast team? No, not really. Are they a quick team? No, not really. Are they a strong team? Well, you would think with having a couple big men with KJ Adams is strong. And Hunter Dickinson, you would be a strong team. But I don't think of them as being like a physically strong. Like, honestly, Houston, who is a smaller team than them in some ways, I view them as like a strong team with their big men. Like, their big men are like strong. They're going to bully you around in the book. I don't know. Kansas isn't really that. Are they physically tough? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not for me to say. I'm not there every day, but I don't know that Bill Self would say they are. Are they mentally tough? I feel like a lot of the mentally tough teams are grinding out a lot of these close wins on the road and overcome things. Like the pinnacle of mentally tough team is the 2011-2012 team for Kansas. Again, maybe that's not for me to say. I'm not there with the practices. Better question for Bill Self, but I feel like he would answer that and no. Are they a sharpshooting team, right? Like the 2017-2018 team, okay, that wasn't like a strong team. You could argue they were quick and fast. I wouldn't say it was like an athletic team necessarily either, that compared to like the rest of the country. LeGerald Vick was athletic. Doak threw down dunks, right? But that was a sharpshooting team. This one's not that either. I wouldn't even really call them a finesse team. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things, like yes, Hunter Dickinson has a finesse post game, but KJ Adams isn't a finesse player. Like Johnny Furphy, I don't know. Like I wouldn't even call them a finesse team either. Are they deep? No, they just are. They just exist. They just are what they are. You know what I mean? Like they're not even, I don't know, maybe this is going too far. They're not really that interesting. They're not really that likable. Like, and I don't mean that to say like, oh, dislike all. I mean it from a standpoint of how memorable are you? How likable of a team you are? There are some college basketball teams that they're very likable. They may only win a game in the NCAA tournament, but they're likable. They have likable dudes, or they're memorable and they do a lot of fun things. Like, I don't know. Feels like I've talked with a lot of KU fans, and a lot of them are kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of over this team. Like I'm ready for something else. There's a lot of like fake toughness. I think that would be the way that I would go about describing it for when I'm talking about that, because it's the level of quit in some of the guys on this team that is astounding to me. And I don't want to go. I mean, you have guys who are playing through injuries and stuff, and you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. But when you see certain guys on the team not going for hustle balls, just standing there, not really going all out for rebounds, not really going all out for taking contact and putting their body on the line. And when it's some of your best players doing it, what message does that send to the rest of the roster and the rest of the team? And so I say all this to say, as much as I have not waned from the idea that would it be shocking if this team still made an Elite Eight or something like that? I guess not. They're probably still going to be a 3 or 4 seed, though the injuries could, maybe prevent that or throw a wrench in that. It's the mentality. It's the stuff at the top. It's the injuries. It's the recent level of play. It's the uninteresting part about this. I don't know. It's a combination of everything. I think I'm finally starting to lean out on even that being a possibility for this team, unfortunately. But who knows? Maybe you win you back next week in the Big 12 tournament. Not holding my breath. All right, let's get on to our GOATs of the game with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, we are brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV, whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament. You're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us right here with the Locked On Network and most of the big pro leagues and college basketball conferences. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out the Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite sporting event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater near you. With killer last-minute deals on tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing on the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to be having. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And it's perfect for the Big 12 tournament next week. If you're going to be going, you might be hanging out at Power and Light. You might not even have tickets yet. And you're just, having a good time out of Power and Light. Maybe you're going to go in, maybe you're not. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to buy tickets to this thing. Pull it up with Game Time. You can get them last minute on your phone at a good price. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On to our GOATs of the game for the KU Houston recap. A bit more of a somber show today. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. We'll get into KU's Big 12 tournament path on Monday's episode of the show, and then we'll get into some of that stuff throughout the week. Let's start with our good GOATs here. Getting the guys more rest, I guess that's a positive. Kevin McCullar did not play in the second half. I thought that was the right call from Bill Self. Now, the one worry there is, even if it was a close game, would he have not played in the second half? Because the first half was a bit ugly enough to make you think, was there something wrong there? So I don't know. That becomes a question, but I guess that is a positive. But still, like DeJuan Harris, who's had to have a big load this year in minutes, 27 minutes. Johnny Furphy, 28 minutes. KJ Adams, 28 minutes. I guess that's kind of a positive that those guys got a little bit more rest going into the Big 12 tournament. It also allowed some of your younger guys on the bench. We saw Jamari McDowell for like 17 minutes in the game to get more run in a tough environment. Not that, any of them had like gigantic games or anything like that, but I guess that's not an awful thing to take away from this game. KJ Adams gets a good GOAT. Not stats that jump off the page. He had 9 points, 2 of 4 from the floor. I did appreciate his aggressiveness in a game where you had to bring a level of physicality and toughness. He was basically saying, you know what, we're not hitting shots right now. Let's get to the free throw line and go after it there. He got there a lot, 5 of 8 at the free throw line, 5 rebounds for the game. He actually led Kansas in defensive rebounds. We've talked about that. You want to see KJ become a better rebounder. Well, he led KU in defensive rebounds in this game. He also had a block and 2 steals. I thought he was really the one guy consistently who was like going for rebounds and 50-50 balls. There were a lot of like tipped up rebounds or 50-50 balls on the floor, possible steals, possible turnovers, that KJ would end up being the first one for KU there. And the problem was that there was another guy for Houston getting there at the same time. So then the ball would go loose and it would go to the third guy who was available. And that was like always a Houston guy. But the lack of effort and try that I saw in Kansas in this game, that did not apply to KJ Adams. I thought that level was there. Unfortunately, that didn't carry over for really everyone else on the team. The bad goats, Hunter Dickinson. He had 11 points, 5 of 10 from the floor, 6 rebounds. So the numbers don't look terrible. 2 turnovers in 23 minutes. I hate to kick a guy when he's down because he got injured, ends up dislocating his shoulder, which, again, you hope he's okay and moving forward and everything. But just trying to separate the injury from the performance before the injury. This was not a good game from Hunter Dickinson. He missed a couple bunnies around the rim, especially when the game was in the early going to the game, when they were establishing that they were going to kind of blow you out and you were trying to just hang in there. There were a lot of hustle plays that just did not happen. A lot of, rebounds where it felt like he was just standing there, not jumping, going for it. And you had an aggressive Houston team getting the ball over him. A lack of kind of 1-2. And the start of the second half is mainly what I'm talking about here. You give up like, what was it? You give up like a dunk, and then you have, I think it was the turnover on just kind of a lazy pass that gets batted and goes the other way. That was, I don't like to call guys out for effort, and you never know what they're dealing with injury. Obviously, you got the injury later, but that was very apparent to me that there was a almost a level, and I don't know if it comes with, hey, we're down 20. What are we doing here? Why am I out on the court? Whatever. I don't know. That just can't happen from one of your top guys, in my opinion. Kevin McCullar gets a bad goat here. Again, also hate to kick a guy when he's down. And with him, his injury that he's been dealing with comes into this game as opposed to Hunter's that came at one point during it. He played 15 minutes, though, in the first half, so he's healthy enough to play. 0 points, 0 of 4 shooting. He had 1 turnover, 1 foul, and no other stats. And there was a moment, if you go back and watch the tape, it was kind of toward the end of the first half. There's like a loose ball. He's standing there at the free throw line, and it's more toward like the elbow wing area, right around there. He stands there the whole time as the ball is being fought for. Again, maybe that's the injury, and maybe that would excuse it, but you didn't really get anything there, and you just hope that he can get healthy toward the end of the season. The injuries obviously are bad goat here, which we just kind of talked about with Hunter and Kevin and what that could mean. I will say there is a part of me that wonders, for the NCAA tournament moving forward, even though it would make KU even more of a thin team than they already are, is there any chance that, hey, this just hasn't been working this year for KU? It's reflective in what the record shows right now. Any chance that they'd be more of a matchup problem for teams if KJ Adams was the 5 surrounded by 4 guards? Now that would take Kevin McCullar getting healthy, but like hypothetically, if you have Timberlake, Furphy, McCullar, DeJuan around KJ Adams, like, are you a more switchable defense? Are you a more pleasant spacing the floor off it? I don't know. Maybe, who knows? Anyway, we can get into that more based on what happens with the Hunter injury. But regardless, DeJuan Harris gets a bad goat here. We talked about him being one of the player matchups. He had to step up. He was really good in the first matchup against Houston, helping keep Jamal Shead in check. Shead was not kept in check this game. He was awesome, doing a little bit of everything for them. And DeJuan Harris had just 3 points, 1 assist to 3 turnovers in 27 minutes of play. Nick Timberlake gets a bad goat. 4 points. He was 0 for 3 from 3, and at least 2 of them off the top of my head were like open corner threes that he missed. Again, those are the shots that you're asking him to make. You're not going to make every open 3, even wide open ones. That's not going to happen. But you can't go 0 for 3 if they're all wide open, right? Like, you got to at least go 1 of 2 if they're both wide open from the corner, and we've seen this way too many times. 5 rebounds, 2 turnovers, came off a really good performance for him. We'll see if he can bounce back, but yeah, that was not great in a game where you really needed to make those shots. The 3-point differential, and Timberlake goes into this year, that was a big bad goat. 11-3 on the amount of made threes for the 2 team. I didn't put Johnny Furphy on the bad goats. He did some good things, but the scoring just hasn't been there. The efficiency hasn't been there for him. So I didn't want to put him in bad. I don't know. I guess, honestly, I would lean toward it being bad because there were a couple times that Houston guards just drove right by him and just took him off the dribble and got easy buckets off it. That's still a work in progress for Furphy on the defensive end. How worried, though, are we about the Johnny Furphy shot? Like, we usually hear about the freshman wall. I think Grady Dick might have hit it at one point last season, and maybe that carried over into the postseason, where I guess he had a really good game. He had like a double-double in the first round, but then Arkansas took him out of the game. They just kind of face guarded him. So maybe that was more of a matchup thing. But he hit that one freshman wall. If you remember, Grady Dick had that one point where, there were a few weeks there where he wasn't able to get off as many shots. Teams were face guarding him, and it was really tough. We hadn't really seen that with Furphy, but I'm wondering if we're seeing it now. And that would be unfortunate because with Grady, it was, okay, now you still have time to bounce back from this. Is this happening so much later in the process because Furphy became a starter so much later in the process? Now over his last 4 games, Furphy is 9 for his last 29. That's just 31% from the floor and 3 of 16 from 3, 18.8% from 3 over his last 4 games. I still have confidence in Furphy to figure it out. I still think he's a good player. He might just be hitting that freshman wall, and he's going to have to overcome it. Unfortunately for him, he's running out of time because of the timing of how that whole situation kind of unfolded. Let's finish up with an update on the KU women's basketball team with the Big 12 tournament on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. All right, we are brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to make sure you find quality professionals that are right for your role, which is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. They're not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. To post your job for free, terms and conditions apply. Thank you if you stuck with us through this whole episode and every day or is tuning in to each and every episode. We'll get to examining KU's Big 12 tournament path and maybe some updates if we can get them on Kevin McCullar and Hunter Dickinson coming up on our next episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So an update for the KU women's basketball team. They were able to earn a Big 12 tournament victory on, Friday night. It was actually their first Big 12 tournament victory since 2019, which is pretty crazy to think about. But they were able to beat BYU. It was a close game at halftime. They dominated in the second half. 77-53 was the final score there. And that was great to see because they'd put themselves in a good position for the NCAA tournament to where, some sites had them as a 9 seed, some as a 10 seed, where it's still close enough on the bubble that, it's not a guarantee they're going to be in. But we saw last year they were on the bubble and they lost that basically Big 12 playing game to TCU, who was the 10 seed. And then they ended up being one of the first teams out and they go to the NIT. And so for them to be in a similar situation at halftime, but end up pulling away and getting the win shows the growth that they needed and prevents you from, losing that bad game that could really drop you in the bubble. Now, they did lose to Texas in the quarterfinal round by double digits, but that's not going to be a bad loss. Texas is one of the 5 best teams in the country. So if anything, it's going to strengthen some of your strength of schedule metrics just by playing them. And I think Kansas is going to be okay. I think they'll make the NCAA tournament. I will say, though, the Texas win would have probably stamped them in. Now they're sitting on the right side of the bubble, but you are in that scare mode a little bit where it's like if a couple teams who are maybe projected to be on the wrong side of the bubble or below you end up scoring a couple big conference tournament wins, they could hop you. Or if there's a couple of those leagues where maybe it's going to only be a 1-bid league because they have a team who's really good, but no other teams would make the tournament, and then that team gets upset in the conference tournament and you get a bid stealer, where does that put you? So it's not a guarantee Kansas makes it, but I do think they've done enough to make themselves feel like they should be in good position to make it when the selection show does come down. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.